From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Well, let's talk international for a little bit here. The Munich Security Conference was last week, wrapped up over the weekend. I took a little time to reflect, and I just have a few thoughts. First of all, the Munich Security Conference has become a big deal. You may remember last year, J.D. Vance made big headlines because he made this despicable speech, this kind of blood and soil neo-Nazi tirade, talking about how migration is destroying civilizations and cultures, how the greatest enemy is from within, talking to Europeans, especially Germans. It was awful. It was pure blood and soil. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's a Nazi ideology that relies on genetics. It relies on a purity of race. You can't let other races poison your nation. As, of course, the Orange Menace has said, actually used the word poison and vermin. I think the most important speaker at Munich was Marco Rubio, who spoke on behalf of the current regime. And he pretty much put J.D. Vance's blood and soil speech on a replay. Everyone complimented him for his tone. Yeah, somehow he dressed it up in language that people could pretend they didn't hear his actual message. But it was the J.D. Vance blood and soil message all over again. But the international community just can't decide how to handle this regime. I've been advising from the very beginning to not give them an inch. But they keep falling back on the strategy of, well, the United States is strong, we really need them, maybe we can flatter them, maybe we can cajole, maybe we can pretend the emperor has clothes. They just stick with that. Rutte, the head of NATO, the one who called the Orange Menace daddy, still continues that same strategy. So they all stood, standing ovation, they all applauded Marco Rubio. Even though he insulted them to their faces, just like J.D. Vance did, he just found softer language. He got the speechwriters together and said, clean it up. And then to double down on the insult, the very next day, he goes to Hungary to hobnob with Viktor Orban, the hero of radical right-wing American conservatives. They look at Hungary as this model for right-wing America. No immigration, no regulations, no democracy. Because, that's all just too unwieldy. It's too inconvenient for our religious bigotry, our racist bigotry, and our partnership with the oligarchs, who we need to advance our authoritarian dream. So Rubio goes to Hungary, and his speech there is even more direct, talking about how the United States and Hungary are connected spiritually and culturally. Yeah. And in just almost a verbatim repeat of the J.D. Vance speech at the RNC, you'll remember last summer, when Vance said America is not an idea, it's people and land. Yeah, pure blood and soil. We talked about it, you and I. Rubio practically spit out the same bars here. Armies do not fight for concepts, he said. Armies do not fight for concepts. They fight for people. They fight for nations. Yeah, that's Vance, blood and soil. America is not an idea. Rubio used the term, again, they love to use civilizational erasure, pure racist tripe, replacement theory. Immigrants poison the soil. So this is the United States on the international stage right now. Another Venezuelan boat attacked, taking the total to 39. Another 3 murdered, taking that total to 133. Innocent people murdered. Because that's what we do now. That's who we are now. Putin can do it. Orban can do it. The Orange Menace can do it. Let's do it. The world media was invited to Caracas, Venezuela last week to ask questions of acting President Delcy Rodriguez. Apparently to whitewash the whole U.S. operation, as though any of this is normal, as though Rodriguez doesn't have a gun to her head. Of course, they didn't want to bother to actually run the government. They just put a gun to Rodriguez's head and said, do what we say. You can make sure that the roads are clear and the trash gets picked up. Go ahead and keep doing all that. We don't want to be bothered. But the oil, yeah, that's ours. We'll sell it, and we'll put it in a private account in Qatar. And you say nice things to Kristen Welker of NBC about what a wonderful relationship you have with the orange regime. Yeah, someday this will all be over, and some future non-MAGA president will be accused of giving Venezuela away. This is the international order now. Israel has killed over 600 Palestinians since the so-called ceasefire. Israeli army raids continue across Gaza, across the West Bank. Settler violence continues. People driven from their homes. People killed. And Netanyahu and the Orange Menace have friendly meetings. Netanyahu visited the White House again. 6, 7 times now. Israel's genocidal war on Gaza has killed at least 72,000 people, wounded almost 200,000. Billions of dollars continue to flow. The group Transparency International, who measures these sorts of things, warns of rising corruption in the United States. The group ranks nations on their level of democracy. The U.S. score is at its lowest ever. Transparency International said the U.S. score fell to 64, ranking 29th in the world. The index shows the global average score hit 42. Only 5 countries scored above 80, and the great majority of nations and territories scored below 50. So we have a global problem. Autocracy, corruption, violence. It was just confirmed on the 2-year anniversary of his death that Russian dissident Alexei Navalny was poisoned. Of course, we all knew it, but authorities have now been able to confirm even the exact type of poison used by Russia's Putin to kill his main political rival. This is why we are not Republicans. We're not conservatives. We're not MAGA. We're not centrists. We're not Democrats around here. This is why we are social anarchists. F*** borders. F*** nation states. F*** money. As long as nation states, money, and borders remain the operative structure of the world, we'll never be free. The so-called liberals can talk about post-war international rules-based order until they're blue in the face. They'll never convince me that the people will be free. And I'm talking about the people of the global north. Forget about the people of the global south. They're just a foregone conclusion. They just need to be poor, exploited for their labor and for the resources on the land in which they live. If you read 2 books over the next year, only 2, in fact, over the next decade, if you only read 2 books, read The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. It describes how humans lived on this planet for tens of thousands of years without the so-called nation state. Before European invasion of this continent, there were over 1,000 tribes, 1,000 different nations, just in what is today the United States. To have kings, monarchs, sultans, presidents, prime ministers, this very complicated hierarchy of leadership, in which all the elites hobnob with each other in places like Munich and Davos, and the rest of us, at best, are pawns on the board. It does not have to be this way. It was not this way for tens of thousands of years of human history. It doesn't have to be this way. The other book, also by David Graeber, it's called Debt, the First 5,000 Years. The absolute stranglehold that money has on us must be overcome. And just like the nation state, just like the hierarchy of government, there's nothing natural about it. It doesn't have to be. Anthropologists, researchers tell us that for thousands of years at a time, human beings lived on this planet in very complex civilizations. They built great cities without even a concept of money. It doesn't have to be this way. And I will never, ever shut up about it. Let's get back to domestic politics. There's quite a lot going on. Early voting has begun for the March 3rd Texas primary, and it is in play on both sides. And there's an absolute opportunity for the Democrats to take that seat. 3 candidates on the Republican side. Tom Paxton is leading the polls with 36%, the last I could find. Senator John Cornyn, the incumbent, 27% currently in the polls, and U.S. Representative Wesley Hunt with 15%. 22% still undecided. Now, the Democrats. U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett with a small lead over Texas State Representative James Tallarico. Kind of a toss-up at this point, with Crockett showing a slight lead. But Brendan Carr, FCC chair, just gave Tallarico a huge boost. You may have heard the story, and it's worth talking about a little bit. On Monday night's broadcast of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, he did a full segment on how CBS lawyers informed him that his guest for that night, the aforementioned James Tallarico, would not be appearing. CBS banned him. Brendan Carr of the FCC, the same Brendan Carr who tried to get Jimmy Kimmel fired, is making noise about the equal time rule. Now, I'm going to let you go find the details. I'm just going to give you the thumbnail here. The equal time rule, not to be confused with the fairness doctrine, we haven't had that since 1987. That was stricken. Pretty much everybody agreed with that, right, left, and center. It was too unwieldy to expect all broadcasters to cover all issues equally. It was just too broad in its scope, and it was a mess. Nobody cares about the fairness doctrine. But the equal time rule gets a little complicated, and that's why I'm going to ask you to go do a little reading on that. I don't feel equipped right now, and I certainly don't have the time to go through the whole thing. But basically it says that in the case of candidates for office, a radio or TV station, again, we're talking over the airwaves now. The FCC doesn't have any standing over streaming services and cable networks and all of that. We're talking over the air, old school. So the equal time rule says if you talk to the Democrat, you also have to talk to the Republican. And I don't know about independents, and I don't know what the standards are. Again, details we'll have to figure out. But that's basically it. Now, there have always been exceptions to the rule. If it's a bona fide newscast, if it's a news interview, it's a documentary, on-the-spot coverage, don't worry about it. They can feature candidates without having to go seek out their opponent. So it's always been a little bit loosey-goosey. Now, here's what you need to know about the current regime. You know about the Jimmy Kimmel thing. You know they've already got Stephen Colbert canceled. His last show was in May. So you know all that. That's the backdrop. Well, now Brendan Carr is making noise about enforcing the equal time rule, and he's openly threatened 3 programs. The View, which is a daytime program, Jimmy Kimmel, and Stephen Colbert, because they all lean left. So the FCC and the regime are cherry-picking how they want to exploit the equal time rule to take away voices from the left. So now we come to Monday night, Stephen Colbert. He's not ordered by the FCC. No, he's ordered by the lawyers at CBS in a classic case of pre-submission, capitulation before the fact. So no, the FCC didn't order this. They pressured CBS. CBS folded like a cheap tent because that's who they are now. And to his credit, Stephen Colbert defiantly did a full segment on his program, even though he was ordered by CBS lawyers not to even talk about it. Not to talk over the air about how Tallarico was bumped from the program by the CBS order. Not to talk about even the fact that it was ordered. Not to talk about the lawyers. All of it. And Stephen Colbert gave him the big middle finger, did exactly what they told him not to do, and discussed it in detail on his over-the-air program. And then invited Tallarico to come on and do a full interview, but they played that only on the YouTube channel. So that's how he got around the order. So that's the thumbnail. I'll let you go find more detail as your interest demands. But the important thing here is, and this is the bottom line that I want to stress, this is how you pour sand in the gears. This is how you resist. This is how you refuse to surrender. So good job, Stephen Colbert. Well done. It was a very stupid and ham-handed move by CBS, and more generally by the FCC, threatening these 3 quote-unquote liberal programs. So as always, we can count on the regime to do stupid things, but we cannot count on that being enough. We have to actively resist. So well done. Well done, Stephen Colbert. Well, shame on the United States of America for just devastating the people of Cuba. This is not making headlines every day, but the people of Cuba are in an absolute crisis right now. They can't keep the power on. They can't feed their children. They don't have clean drinking water. Everything is precarious because of the harsh sanctions of the United States. And they're threatening other nations, Mexico in particular. Don't you dare send a drop of water or fuel or food or anything else to Cuba. They have no trouble with scores of other anti-democratic regimes. They have no problem with attacking democracy here at home. But you've just got Cuba in their sights, and they don't give a damn what happens to the people. So we are thinking of the people of Cuba today. There's rotting garbage on the streets. Hospitals unable to perform surgeries, even to provide basic care. People are dying and being buried in cardboard coffins because the right wing of this country has this sick obsession about Cuba. Because Stephen Miller is a racist to his bones. Because Secretary of State and wannabe presidential nominee Marco Rubio has to compensate for his weakness, his weak mind, his weak spirit. He's weak as a man. He's weak as a human. And they don't give a damn about people suffering because of their sick, lifelong obsession over Cuba. We're going to talk about this soon, I promise, but I will just give you the headline. A new AP poll tells us that Democrats are very unhappy with the Democratic Party. Now, that's a good news, bad news kind of situation. They should be very unhappy. That's the good news. The people, the base, the actual voters who identify as Democrats should be unhappy, and they are unhappy with the party. Now, the bad news is this could go one of two ways. One, they're so disappointed and upset that turnout tanks, and MAGA, in spite of themselves, holds power. They hold the Senate. I don't think there's much of a chance they hold the House, but the margins could remain very, very small and basically inoperable. Now, the other way it could go, the voters display such disdain that the party itself, especially the leadership, sees the light and tries to jump in front of the progressive Bernie AOC parade. That's always a possibility. And if they want to jump in front and pretend they're leading, fine, as long as the agenda moves forward. The left-wing populist agenda, the Bernie agenda, the progressive agenda. So that's all I'm going to say on that for today. I promise we'll get into left politics very soon because we do need to spend a little time on that. I don't want this headline to get away. Dr. Linda Davis, have you heard this name? A teacher, a beloved member of the community in Chatham County, Georgia, was killed earlier this week when a man allegedly fleeing from ICE slammed into her car. I say allegedly because the only reports we have are from DHS, are from ICE, the people who told us that Renee Good and Alex Preddy were terrorists. They told us that Preddy was brandishing a weapon, threatening ICE officers, ready to massacre them. They told us that Renee Good was trying to ram innocent ICE agents with her car. They lie constantly. This is their MO. So no, I don't believe a single word they're telling us about Dr. Linda Davis, grammar school teacher from Georgia. Their story is that a man they had pulled over was trying to escape, and he took off quickly and rammed her car. You might as well just take that and just toss it in the garbage. It means nothing at this point. Whatever they say means nothing. Maybe they were chasing him. Maybe they were in pursuit, which is in violation of Chatham County Sheriff's policy. They don't do high-speed pursuits. So maybe it was that. There have been several documented cases where ICE vehicles not only chase some poor driver that they see as a suspect of some kind, not only chase them, but actually ram their vehicle. They cause the crash. This is part of their MO. So whatever happened here, if it was a high-speed chase, if they rammed the suspect, if they rammed the victim, I don't know what happened, but I don't believe a single word they say. And Dr. Linda Davis is dead. So I don't know what the hell happened. I'll be looking forward to an independent investigation. ICE has to be abolished. All of DHS has to be abolished. Just dismantle the whole thing. I've been against the very existence of DHS since its inception after 9/11, when they hastily cobbled it together. I thought it was a ridiculous proposal then. So, yeah, abolish ICE, abolish DHS. Things like FEMA and TSA, whatever border enforcement we need, they can all take their place under different departments or become independent, whatever you have to do. But DHS has to go entirely. Every day we learn more about these abhorrent detention facilities, members of Congress who've been able to get in for inspections, victims who are able to speak or escape, tell us horror stories about lack of food, lack of sanitation, lack of medicine, health care. You may have heard the story of the 2-month-old baby who had to be rushed to medical care, drowning in her own vomit. Survived, thankfully. But who knows what kind of long-term damage to her and to all of the children. Study after study tells us that detaining children results in both immediate and long-term developmental damage. You can't hold children in jail. There's no amount of time that's safe. You can't do it for 60 days or 30 days or 10 days or 1 day. The detention camp in Dilley, Texas. The Whipple detention camp in the Twin Cities. Nothing but horror stories, inhumane conditions. And as we've talked about, ICE is spending $38 billion turning mega warehouses into detention centers. And one last thought. The major news networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MS Now, just stop. Just stop. Give up. Don't give them another minute of your time. ABC has proven it. The latest proof, the program The View this week did not cover the Stephen Colbert story, didn't mention it. I went back, I looked at their YouTube channel. I looked through both the Tuesday and the Wednesday shows. Not a mention of the Monday night incident of Colbert or the Tuesday follow-up. As a matter of fact, on Wednesday, they led with the story of AOC having trouble answering her question on Taiwan, going with the right-wing lie about how she completely fell apart. I saw the video. Yeah, she stumbled a bit. Taiwan's a really tough question to answer. Yeah, she stumbled a little bit. She took her time. It was no more than Barack Obama does on almost every answer. He hems, he haws, he thinks. It takes at least 20 or 30 seconds to get him going. It's pretty much what she did. Now, I'm not here to defend AOC. Yeah, she stumbled. Who cares? The point I'm making is that's the story they led with when every other news outlet in the country was talking about Stephen Colbert. And then it was their only news/politics story of the entire program. They usually do at least a couple, sometimes 3 or 4. That was their only news story, their only politics story of the entire show. ABC News, owned by Disney, of course. We can't even pretend anymore that they're even trying. NBC News, as I mentioned, sent Kristen Welker to do a whitewashing interview with Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela. NBC altered the audio of their Olympic coverage when Vice President J.D. Vance was booed royally in Milan. Yeah, NBC and Peacock, they censored that. They took out the boos. They deny it, but that's what you do now. You just deny. That's the lesson learned from the Orange regime. CBS, we know what they've done in the past, what they did this week to Colbert. Anderson Cooper finally had enough and quit as a correspondent on 60 Minutes. So forget it. Forget the major networks. Maybe years from now, they can rebuild trust. But for the time being, just forget it. I want to mention just very briefly the 2 people we lost this week, Jesse Jackson and Robert Duvall. I don't usually spend much time talking about celebrity deaths, but these are significant. Jesse Jackson, I'm just going to tell a very quick story. I got to meet him once or twice, just sort of quick handshake hellos, because I volunteered for his 1988 presidential campaign. And the 2 things I want to mention are this. One, he should have won that primary. He was ahead in the polls. He was winning state primaries, one after another. And he was sabotaged by corporate media and by the Democratic Party. Just like Bernie, several years later. Twice. But for those of you maybe not old enough to remember, that was the case. I remember just being incensed at the time. No corporate media took him seriously. And much worse than that, they actively dismissed him, did everything they could to discredit him, to diminish his candidacy. That just wasn't going to happen on their watch. The other quick thing I want to say, I've told this story before. I walked into the campaign office in San Francisco, told them I wanted to volunteer. They put me at a table stuffing envelopes or something. I was happy to do whatever they wanted to do. But in the course of the morning, simply having conversations with the people in the office, just getting to know each other, talking around the table, they found out that I could paint banners. I had indeed done so professionally at San Francisco State, my alma mater. So they suggested I do that instead. And within one day, by that afternoon, they had me in a back room, this huge room, painting these 16-foot banners. And they gave me a budget and requisition forms for buying the banner materials and the paint and the brushes. And that's what I wound up doing for several weeks in San Francisco leading up to the June primary day. And I repeat this story only to remind you, walk in the door. Just walk in the door. Your talents will be discovered and utilized. All you got to do is walk in the door. You just got to get started wherever you want to serve. And there are so many places now to serve the cause. So his passing reminded me of that story. There are hundreds of things to say about Jesse Jackson, and I'll leave that for other commentators and for your, again, the level of your interest. Go find that. The passing of Robert Duvall. I never really talk about celebrities who die, but I just thought, good opportunity to talk to younger listeners who may not even know who Robert Duvall was or appreciate how great he was. So just a little friendly advice from an old guy to the young people. Go find a Robert Duvall movie and just watch it. Go watch Apocalypse Now. Go watch Lonesome Dove. The Godfather. My God, he was great in The Godfather, the first two Godfathers. My favorite, Tender Mercies, for which I think that was the one he won the Oscar for, right? Tender Mercies? Pretty sure. I looked at our numbers recently, and our younger listeners are growing. We don't have many in the 18 to 29 category, but we've got a lot of listeners in their 30s, and that makes me happy. And you're who I'm talking to right now. Go find a Robert Duvall movie. You'll thank me. All right. Thanks for listening. This episode and all episodes can be found at the website charlespurcell.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Blue Sky and Substack. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. And Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. There it is. I love you. See you out there.